The following was paid for by Palmetto Alfa Romeo.
This is the Sunday Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree look at the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
All right, everybody, and welcome to the Sunday Express. Gary Allen with you here on 880 The Biz. I hope everybody's had a wonderful week since last Sunday. We've got a great show for you tonight, and I want to thank everyone for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here. I know at 5 p.m. it's a little awkward, but the Dolphin game is over. Most other games are over, and, so I appreciate everybody tuning in and listening. We have a great show for you today. We have Dr. Laura Sicola, who's going to be on with me first here in just a couple of minutes, and then, of course, we have Marshall Moore, who will be ending up the program with us as we talk a little bit about the stock market and what's going on, what to expect for 2019. Let me, first of all, tell you a little bit about our very first guest, Dr. Laura Sicola. She's been with me on my Tuesday night show. Dr. Laura is a leadership communications expert, speaker, and author of Maximize Your Leadership Influence. As the founder of Vocal Impact Productions, she turns leaders into powerful influencers by helping them master the 3 C's: command the room, connect with the audience, commanding audience, and close the deal. She has coached business owners, politicians, executives, and organizations such as Comcast, Wikimedia, the U.S. Department of Commerce, and IBM on how to confidently present themselves as true leaders both on and off the stage in order to get the results they want to make a positive and lasting impression. She's also a person who's been on TED Talk numerous times. The one time that she talked about what to sound like as a leader, start by saying your name right, has received over 5 million views on YouTube. So I'm very excited to have her with us. She's a dear friend of mine, and she's a Giants fan. So next week we got to make a bet because my Colts play the Giants, and today they beat the Cowboys 23-0. So Dr. Sicola, what do you think about that?
Well, I have to say, it has not been a great season for us, but there are those little glimmers of hope. I'm taking that as an early Christmas miracle, but my hopes are not great for an ongoing winning streak at this point.
Exactly. Plus the temperature up there. I was talking to my brother, Father Greg,
awful.
who's up in Boston. It's like 15 degrees today.
Yeah, it's just unpleasant. That's when you wish it was Celsius, and it's just not.
No, and I think it's 78 degrees here today in Florida. I don't want to make you feel.
You win. Yeah, I don't even try. You win.
All right. When people call you up, and people, I mean corporations, what is it that they're looking for you? I mean, what do you and your corporation provide that they seek out, that they know they need in order to make their lot in life, their corporation move smoother, operate better? What is it that they're looking for from you?
Influence. They realize that they may have all the brains in the world, lots of answers, lots of ideas, great resources, but they're not getting the results that they want from the right stakeholders. And it has to do with the fact that they're not able to message all that genius inside the way it needs to be messaged in order to get other people to see what you want them to see, get on board, and make it happen. So it's a lack of influence as the result of poor communication skills.
And that's really it. In spite of the fact that many of these corporations, the executives you deal with, and I mean some of the executives in top 500 companies, as I mentioned a few, it's still communication skills that either gets it across. It's sort of like politics. Everything is local. Yes,
very much so. You have to talk to people. And whether it's a one-on-one, whether it's a huge auditorium full of people, whether it's on camera or here on the radio, you have to be able to get your ideas across to people in a way that resonates with them, that makes them go, makes them see what's in it for them, either directly or indirectly, shows them what's relevant. And at their level, you're not talking over their head, you're not dumbing it down, it's not all about you, it's all about them.
You have written this wonderful book, which I have read numerous times and picked up some things from here, Maximize Your Leadership Influence. The book is laid out different than most books are. Talk about that and what decision you came to in order to lay out this book so people can understand it better.
Sure. It's a unique platform. I completely agree. It's published by a company called Think Aha, and they have this great little book format that is their AHA series, where instead of writing your typical 300-page personal development or business professional development book, which, like, really, who has time to slog through 300 pages nowadays? They all sit on our nightstand waiting to be read. This takes those 300 pages and distills them down like as if I had taken notes from my own book of 300 pages, and then this is just the Cliff Notes. This is the short version. It is 140 Twitter-length quotes, and they're all organized by chapter, by theme, by section. So you have choices. You can either read the book from start to finish, and you could really finish the entire thing in about an hour if you were just to read it straight through, or you could just wake up every day, open to a random page, and see what little nugget of inspiration was there. But the idea is that it's a journal format. So as you read each piece, you start to think about, okay, what am I doing in this area? Am I following this principle? Or is it something I've never thought about before? Or, gosh, is it something that might be standing in my way from having the influence that I want? So it's you can take notes for yourself. You can go back, see what you wrote some other time, and see how that same quote may change in its meaning for you, in its value or its immediate relevance from one time to the next. But it's a very interactive little journal of a book. And so it's a real quick read when you just want to get it and move on.
What do you see different in the business culture now than, say, when you first got started that has surprised you the most or surprised you the least?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Surprised the most versus surprised the least. I shifted gears business-wise about 5 years ago when I relaunched as Vocal Impact Productions with the exclusive focus on leadership communication. And the trigger for me, and this is on a tangential level to the conversations that are going on nowadays, but it was when Lean In was popular, when that whole movement first started and when the book came out, because frankly it's not my world and it wasn't my experience. So I was really surprised to hear that there was still that much gender-based discrepancy in pay and in success and in challenges and participation. And I thought, well, gee, maybe there's also room for stepping in on the communications front. And that's where I began, was really from the gender angle, but that was about 20 minutes long for me as a focus, because within moments they said, the guys aren't so good at communicating either. So it's not just about helping one side to meet the other. It's about helping them to communicate universally. So that's where it came in. And just recognizing that so the surprise for me is realizing that there are still some gender-based issues in communication. Least surprising to me is the recognition that people who are the greatest experts in their niche are usually the worst communicators about it. You get stuck in what I call the expert's curse. You know too much. You can't understand what other people don't understand about it. So you just get bogged down in the details. You bore them. Their eyes glaze over. They get lost. How do you make them go, oh, yeah, I totally get that? That's what people who are experts don't know how to do.
One of the things that you and I talked about when you have been on my nighttime show was the fact that I was raised without ever assuming I was going to be in this business.
Sure.
Originally, I wanted to be an airline pilot like my dad. But one thing I learned along the way in high school and college, and when I was in the Air Force and when I worked in different businesses, if I'm going to give a speech or I'm going to give a talk about something, if a school calls me in, which a number of them did when I lived in Las Vegas, and talk about what it's like to be a stand-up comic or a talk show host, I always put a story in there, a funny story or a funny situation that I've been involved in, as compared to just going to a lecture and it's blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And I know you're an advocate of that, and you really, that's one thing. Another thing you and I connect on is that if you make it fun and interesting, you'll learn more. The teachers I learned from were the ones that were funny, or they made it interesting compared to just dry, stuff. Is that a big obstacle for you to overcome with executives?
Yes and no. I want to qualify that not everybody is naturally funny. So, you have that quick wit. Mine's you always fear somebody who says, I'm really funny. You go, all right, yeah, no, you're not. So I hesitate to say that I've got a pretty good sense of humor, too, because that's something for everybody else to judge, obviously. But I'm pretty quick on my feet with those kinds of comments. Not everybody is. So if you're not, don't go for humor. That being said, just because you can't make a story funny doesn't mean you can't make it interesting. And story is really the key word there. Taking dry statistics or a simple explanation of something and finding a way to storify it, so to speak, is a way to help people connect. People just naturally gravitate to wanting to know how the story ends. They follow along with the plot much more than just an explanation of point A, point B, point C.
Yeah. You're listening to the Sunday Express here on 880 The Biz. Gary Allen with you. My guest is Dr. Laura Sicola. She is a leadership communications expert, speaker, and author of a book, Maximize Your Leadership Influence. We're talking about, and also the president and executive for Vocal Impact Productions. I know I used to say visual, and I don't know why, but I know a company, Visual Impact, and I used to do some voice work for them. But Vocal Impact Productions, which you just go .com, and you'll find Dr. Laura Sicola, a great lady, a beautiful lady, inside and out. That's why she's always been a friend to me. You talked about the gender culture in big business. Do you find in many of your speaking engagements there are more and more women that are joining the groups now in comparison to what it was a few years back?
I'm not sure I have my finger on the pulse as far as attendance at women's initiatives and interest groups, et cetera, in companies, but they are certainly growing. And I have a lot of clients where I end up doing talks for their women's initiatives, and some of them are still quite nascent. They're just getting off the ground in the last year or two. So more and more companies are certainly realizing that there is a space for this, that women and other minority groups, other diversity groups are looking for an opportunity to work together and identify the common challenges that they perhaps uniquely face, and to try to figure out how to be more successful.
Talk a little bit about, and we're going to go back to why the executives come to you. Obviously, you do in your speeches, you must do some follow-ups with these corporations. Do you find that if you go back to Corporation A year or two later, that the culture maybe has changed, they've adapted some of the things that you've suggested, and things have improved a great deal?
I don't know that I would say corporate-wide people have adapted my recommendations, because usually I'm either speaking to groups or I'm coaching individuals at various levels of leadership. So the goal for me over time, over a year or two, is to see where people have said, we took this piece that you recommended, now could you build on this element? So we did, general leadership communication skills. Can you talk to us now about navigating conflict, for example, or pitching ideas and doing the annual reviews and the one-on-ones, how to do advocacy work in those areas. So that's interesting to see what they want to build on and what areas are of greatest need and interest to them. And then, of course, when I've done the one-on-one coaching with somebody, it's great to see where either that person comes back a year or two later and says, I want to re-engage because now I'm at this new level and I realize there's new communication challenges and we did great work at level 1, let's do more at level 2. Or where somebody else from the company comes in and says, I can't believe the transformation I saw with this person over the last 6 months. I got somebody else I need you to do that for, or I want you to do that for me. So that's where you know that it matters, because it's not me pitching my skills or my ideas, my packages to a company. Right. It's when somebody else notices, wow, that person just did a night and day shift, and I want what he's got now. And then they find out it's because of the work that we did together.
Would you say the word adaptability is prominent in what you teach for your students? I'll say students, to succeed. They need to be ready to adapt to something new, which has always been in the old boys network. Oh, it's working for 20 years. It's continuing to work, which I'm sure are the executives that you must pull your hair at if you're confronted by them. But do you find adaptability probably to be a word that is most often comes to the forefront in your thinking when it comes to different people you work with?
Almost every time. That's always a challenge, because most people are good at communicating certain things to certain people at certain times. And that's the comfort zone. And there's this mental roadblock with the idea that, well, if I want to communicate to this other group, whether it's a vendor or a new boss or a new company or a new client or whoever it is, that the way you've always communicated to your old cadre of whoever it is may not be the best approach for this new group. But to shift gears, depending on what that shift requires to be most effective with that new audience, does that shift feel weird to you? Are you not comfortable making that change for whatever reason, no matter how great or small? Again, the comfort zone has quite the gravitational pull. So we have to talk then about the adaptability, right? Do you want to talk in a way that's most comfortable to you because you're just used to it, knowing that it's not going to get the results that you want in this new area, or are you willing to shift and learn to make that new style also part of your repertoire? Not just think about it as this black and white, well, this is me, that's not me. Because if that's where your brain is stuck, this is me, that's not me, then just go home. You're saying that you're not willing to learn, you're not willing to learn to work with new people, so why are you here? What exactly would you like me to do? It's a pen, not a wand. I can't make magic happen.
Do you think the reason for some of that adaptability is not frightened, but not the unwillingness? I'm trying to think of the right word or how to phrase this, but they adapting to new people, adapting to new systems, adapting to change, adapting to working a different way than what they're used to. For instance, millennials now care about less than what my generation cared about. I'm not sure what millennials care about, but they seem to care about less.
Let's say they care about something that's different, whatever it is. Sure.
Yeah. So how does that play now into your speeches when you go into a company and you see a lot of young people that possibly are millennials?
If I'm being brought in to work with a group that happens to be that heavily skewed generation-wise, it's usually for a reason, and they will tell me what that reason is. That it's about executive presence, that they still want to be taken seriously, but they don't understand why they're or what's going to be required in this type of environment. So, of course, there's a big difference between being a millennial in a creative advertising agency versus a millennial in an insurance company. Insurance or banking is going to be a much more conservative world in dress code and behavior and written communications, et cetera. So understanding how you can still be you, but in a way that's palatable and not overwhelming and not too countercultural right off the bat. I mean, you can wake somebody up without smacking them across the face when you're trying to do something a little bit differently. Yeah. So finding that balance between enough but not too much is usually where the challenge lies, especially on the millennial front.
Which is easier to deal with? Someone who is fresh in the business community or someone who's been around a long time and thinks they know more than anybody on the planet? I'm
going to actually change that wording, so to speak, because it's not, ironically, the age of the person that determines whether or not they think they know more than everybody. There's plenty of people who are new to the business world who come in thinking that they were born knowing everything, and there's plenty of people who are at the top who think they've already seen it all, so now they know everything. So for me, the person who I can work the best magic with is the one who comes to me and says, I know I've got a block here. I know there's a gap somewhere in my skill set, and it's keeping me from being great. I know it might sting a little bit to have to come face-to-face with some of these things. I know I'm going to have to step out of my comfort zone to be able to really perform the way I know that I could if I let you do your job, maybe if they let me do my job. But that person who says, let's do it, let's make it happen, they're great. I don't care whether they're 20 or 120 years old. I mean, that being said, I typically work with leadership, so, top management, VPs and C-level members, but so I'm not typically working with the new entries unless it's for a company-wide speaking engagement of some sort. But, it's the age is not directly relevant to how stuck they are in their ways or how willing they are to change.
You were talking to Dr. Laura Sicola, is a leadership communications expert, speaker, and author of Maximize Your Leadership Influence and the founder of Vocal Impact Productions. You're listening to 880 the Biz. I'm Gary Allen with the Sunday Express. Talk about the types of clients you won't work with. You're called in and you will not work with that person. You've tried, but it isn't happening.
Well, those are two different things. If I've tried and it's not happening versus they call me in and I make an assessment that says this is not a good fit. I won't take the assignment. That's really more what it is. Because if I've done that part right, then we're not going to get to the point where we've worked together and nothing's happening. So if somebody calls me in to work with somebody else on their docket, usually, so let's say the head of HR calls me in to work with somebody who's a VP and potentially in line for a senior leadership position. They might say to me, look, this person is a bull in the china shop. He is he leaves a trail of dead bodies after every conversation he has, and he's really good at X, Y, and Z. You know, he's brilliant as an analyst. He's good at this, good at that, but you know, he's just going to burn too many bridges if we put him way at the top. So either he's got to fix this, or you know, it's going to really be a career derailer for him. And then my question to them is, does he know that? And if the answer is an unequivocal yes, we've had multiple talks about this, it's in his files, it's blah, 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 we've tried this and that already, then great, let's talk. But if they say, well, and there's some sort of hedged, well, he knows that he needs to work on his communication. And, you know, he knows he can be a little rough around the edges. He knows he needs... No. You just told me if he doesn't fix this, it's a career derailer. He will be dethroned when the spot opens up. He will no longer be the next in line. So if you have not told him that, then one of two things needs to happen. Either you need to tell him that yourself, or you need to let me tell him that, and you need to be there for it. And we're going to, or at least allow me to help you navigate that conversation diplomatically, nevertheless. But if he doesn't understand what's at stake, he will not put the effort into it. And we are getting to, once, I learned that lesson very, very early on, where somebody told me what was at stake, and they would not tell the other person because they'd been hiding it too long out of fear of being politically incorrect and whatever else. And I tried it anyway, and that person just never really understood why I was there. So it was very clear he was not putting the work in. And interestingly, it was in our very last day of coaching when he opened our session with an apology to me. And he said, you know, I was working with this other colleague of mine who I really thought has challenges X, Y, and Z in his communication skills. And it suddenly occurred to me that maybe other people think that way about me. And I thought, yeah, that's why I'm here. But they hamstrung me in not letting me tell him that it was that just direct. And they never told him. So, you know, I never quite was able to get him to where he needed to be. But he realized it himself too late. Had we had that conversation early, it would have been a very, very different experience, and the outcomes would have been far more profound.
Yeah, I think sometimes HR people or people that are in charge are afraid to confront other people with what they feel is their downfall. I said to you when you were on the Tuesday night show that I used to do some game shows for a company called Game Show America. They still exist. I was a game show host. And when we would go out in the audience and try to talk to some of the female executives, they didn't want to be bothered. They said, oh, no. One woman came up to me once and said, please don't. I don't want to go up and make a fool of myself in front of the other men.
Right.
And I was like, what? I mean, you're a VP. I said, I don't want to make a fool out of myself because I'll never be able to live it down in our culture. And I went, boy, that's a shame. You know, that really is a shame that in the business culture, you can't really be yourself and express yourself. Yet that's what we all search for, is to be yourself. Let me be me. Let me be productive. Let me give you my ideas. And yet they get into the culture of the business world and they forget it. I asked you on the previous time you were on, when you were asked at a particular rally, we got a couple of minutes before we take our bottom of the hour break. But about the two political candidates that ran in the last presidential election, and we're not going to get into politics. We're not even going to get into names. But you expressed the desire that one you could have worked with and the other one you couldn't have worked with. Why?
Sure. And again, this has nothing to do with political affiliation, preferences, or anything along those lines.
Well, you're a Giants fan, so, we understand that.
The simple challenge that a lot of people ask me just on a rhetorical level, would you ever coach either of these candidates? And the answer is very simply, yes, I would have coached one, but not the other. And, it's not because of the fact that, simply put, one is coachable and one was not. One it sort of feels odd to not be using names at this point because it's sort of obvious. But, one was very much in I like the way I'm doing what I'm doing, so I'm going to hire people who are going to let me do it more. And the other one was more open to coaching. Now, unfortunately, that person, I think, took the wrong advice from the wrong people and led a very weak campaign as far as their messaging strategies were concerned. And do I wish I was able to step in and give some advice and do some coaching on that front. Right. Because I could have affected that particular change, whether or not I actually wanted those results, just knowing that from a professional level, the difference that I could have seen in a client. But the one is coachable and the other one is not. So that's the only reason. If I thought the other one were more coachable, I would have worked with that person too.
What, in the few minutes we have before the break, what is true leadership to you? Do you know it when you see it?
It's a great little cocktail of ingredients. I don't think it's a single thing, but I think it is really a combination of having the vision, of course, knowing where you want to go, and being able to find and listen to the right people around you who together can figure out the best way to get there. And if you can establish that team and that kind of open dynamic to collaboratively work and figure out that path, I think you could do amazing things.
Yeah, I mean, every executive I've ever talked to, whether it's in show business or just regular business, or even like my brother, who's a priest up in Boston, he said, you surround yourself with people that are smarter and better than you, and you will never fail.
Right. Right.
Maybe my mother was an interior designer. She knew everything there was about the business. She could upholster furniture. She could paint furniture. She could finish everything. But she always surrounded herself with decorators to help her when she was working on major projects like hotels. She always surrounded herself with guys and women who were smarter than her, that knew more than her, and even understood the new ways of how to do things. And she learned on every project. My father, a captain for Eastern Airlines, always said, and the only time he ever got mad is when the first female came into the cockpit, and he's that World War II generation where they belong somewhere else, but he was always interested in learning something new about flying. It's the same as being in radio or television. It's the same thing as being what you do. If you surround yourself and listen to people that you admire, people that are smarter than you, you will always learn something. You will always gain some advantage towards the person that isn't paying attention. And it's like a statement that somebody said to me once, Randy West, who's a great game show host out in California. Rome may not have been built in a day, but every day we laid a brick or two.
Exactly.
You have the
right people doing the right part of the job.
Exactly. We're going to take a break here in just in about a minute. I just want to remind everybody you're listening to 880 The Biz. Gary Allen here with the Sunday Express. Dr. Laura Sicola is my guest. She's a leadership communications expert, speaker, and author of Maximize Your Leadership Influence. We're going to talk about the book in a little bit, as well as the founder of Vocal Impact Productions. She has spoken to many of the major corporations, Fortune 500 companies throughout the world. We're also going to talk about TED Talk on the other side. So for right now, let's just take a break, and we'll be back on the other side with more of the Sunday Express.
Introducing the new Palmetto Alfa Romeo, where you can drive Italian luxury for less. If you have 3, 6, 9, or even 12 months left on your car loan or lease, Palmetto Alfa Romeo will pay off your loan or lease, allowing you to trade up to a new luxurious 2019 Alfa Romeo Giulia sedan or a new 2019 Alfa Romeo Stelvio SUV. Lease either one, starting as low as $379 per month for 24 months. Absolutely no security deposit. Visit the new Palmetto Alfa Romeo, 13110 Biscayne Boulevard, North Miami. Call us at 305-342-8500. That's 305-342-8500. Or shop online at PalmettoAlfaRomeo.com. Palmetto Alfa Romeo. Excellent service is all we have. Lease the Giulia for $379 per month or the Stelvio for $399 per month for 24 months. $49.39 due at signing with approved credit plus tax tag and fees. Check details online at PalmettoAlfaRomeo.com.
Are you a small business, a nonprofit, or a ministry trying to figure out how to effectively use social media to target the people you want to connect with? Buena Vida Media has affordable solutions customized for your organization. Call us now at 305-345-3461. Again, that number is 305-345-3461, and don't get left behind. 305-345-3461. Again, that number is 305-345-3461.
If you're considering a podcast, contact us to see how easy it is to get started. Podcasting gets more popular every day, and all of the tools that you need to create a great podcast are right here at Salem Media. Our special introductory package includes a month worth of podcasts, production, distribution, and management, and even a co-host if needed. You're welcome. All for $175. Don't wait. Take advantage of this great offer now. 305-644-0800, the premier podcast studios. Salem Media. That's 305-644-0800. 880thebiz.com.
Now back to more of the Sunday Express with Gary Allen on AM 880 The Biz.
And thank you all very much to be back with you here on the Sunday Express. My guest is the amazing Dr. Laura Sicola. She is the founder of Vocal Impact Group, and she's also been experienced dealing with TED Talks. And I kind of want to get into that here a little bit before we get back into your book and get back into the executives and stuff. How did you initially get involved with TED Talk?
So giving one or coaching?
Well, giving one, I've seen a number of them. They certainly wouldn't want me on stage doing any of that. So that obviously,
I bet they would.
Oh, I'd end up doing my impressions, Laura. You know that, but yeah, I mean, how does one get on there, and how does one get involved with the organization? Obviously, one must have intelligence, which leaves me out. But how did you get involved with giving a talk, and then getting involved further with the organization?
Well, I think first you underestimate yourself because the impersonations would be great, and you'd find a way to work them into the talk as necessary. But for me, it was very simply a matter of at the University of Pennsylvania, I was teaching a graduate class, and one of my students happened to be the curator for the upcoming TEDx Penn Talk, and the theme of the conference, and all TED conferences have a theme that you never actually hear about when you're watching the videos. But the theme was creating the sound. And so they're looking for however anybody from any different walk of life could figure out a way to work that theme into a talk from whatever their industry was. And so my student came up and she said, I know you do a lot of work on leadership and voice. And so our theme is creating the sound. Would you be open to doing a TED Talk for us? And so, I had a meeting with their head of the project and pitched what my idea was. And she said, great. And that was that. I was in. So either you're going to get invited to do a talk, or often there are calls for speakers, and you need to submit a proposal. If you Google TEDx call for speakers of some sort, there's not a lot of lead time. You'll have a couple of weeks at best, and then by the time you find out if your proposal has been accepted again, it will only be a couple of months tops. So you're not going to have a year worth of lead up on this. It moves fast. But generally speaking, you would apply for it otherwise.
And you're now an influencer within the organization. How does that work?
And that's also worked in two different directions. One is that I got tapped by an arm of TED that is called the TED Fellows organization, where TED will take under their wings entrepreneurs who have these really world-changing ambitions and projects that they're doing, whether it's about creating an educational program for prisoners in different African countries to help them get law degrees from within prison and make them whole different learning environments, or people who are trying to save the whales in the Indian Ocean and other places. So they really have these incredible programs, and they want these CEOs, these leaders, to be able to share their story on the TED stage, among other things. So they brought me in to work with these fellows and to be able to tell their stories. And then other people will just simply find me because they see my TED Talk or they understand that I do different kinds of pitch coaching and public speaking training along with the leadership communication stuff. And so they'll say, look, I'm going to give a TED Talk, and I would like you to help me with it. So very organically, just one-on-one, people recognizing that this is something they need to get better at to succeed at a spot that they have already found.
Oh, that's fantastic. And of course, you're the one that you did, which has received over 5 million views, is just outstanding. I want to talk a little bit about something you call fan or fanning the flames as far as before you start giving a talk. And I got to tell you something. In reading this and taking notes from it, it's the same thing that is taught to performers. Whether you be a comedian or an actor or a producer or a director, many of the points that are in these are very close to what we do, what I do for my audience, which I'm very grateful for when they listen in either on Tuesday night or this afternoon. The number one is know your audience. Yes. If you don't know your audience, you're lost. Correct.
So the examples, I may be talking about a similar topic about projecting executive presence or finding your leadership voice, et cetera, but whether I'm talking to a group of CFOs or a group, there's an organization, a client of mine has, their company does some charity work mentoring underprivileged high school girls. So needless to say, I may be talking about similar underlying principles, but the examples I'm going to use and the manner in which I'm going to deliver it, even the outfit that I wear to do these programs, they're all going to be different because I have to be able to resonate with my audience. And that, what a 16-year-old girl from the inner city of wherever is going to find relatable and inspirational is going to be a different example, most likely, from what a 60-year-old CFO from an insurance company is going to appreciate.
Yeah. I think that's been the problem in communication for years on many levels, government, inner city, etc., urban, rural, understanding who you're talking to and what you're saying to them and how to communicate with people, especially young people. They are hipper than we ever were when I was a kid. I mean, I was
definitely hipper than I ever was. I was never hip. It just never happened.
I mean, how hip can you be from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, for God's sakes? It's a coal mining little town. I mean, everybody there is basically poor, and if you work in radio, you still are. But knowing how to speak to people, learning how to speak to people. Yeah. I told you that I'm moving out of where I am at because the woman here and I do not get along, and she had the gall to say to me, one of the reasons why I don't get along with you, Gary, is I don't think you have people skills. I don't think you know how to talk to people.
Right.
And she's 70-something years old. Well, I learned how to talk to people when I was a kid. I've never been shy. I've never been a wallflower. But, and then you also talk about confidence. You must have confidence. Talk about that, because a lot of people have a lack of confidence.
Yes, or they have confidence in certain areas, but they have a lot of self-doubt or suffering from maybe the imposter syndrome in other contexts. The imposter syndrome being this fear of feeling like a fraud and feeling like at some point somebody might expose you as someone who really doesn't belong where they are, no matter how good you already are. So you have to get that head trash out of your way. And that's really where a lot of people tend to get stuck. So, have you heard that expression before, imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing how many people are stuck with it. So it's
where people think they don't belong there. What am I doing here? I don't deserve to be here. Why am I here? And lastly, before we go to concluding, to kind of wrapping this up here in the next 2 minutes, you be authentic.
Yes. Yes.
Whatever you do.
And that's the challenge, you tying in the authenticity piece with the adaptability piece. And to your earlier point, the fact is what I talk about, my strategies, etc., do resonate with the theater group, the ability to play to your audience. Because a lot of people feel like, well, if I'm playing to my audience, then am I still being myself? Or am I acting? So my world is about helping you figure out a way to straddle both of those values, being adaptable and still authentic at the same time, because that's really the secret sauce.
I've always thought when I gave a discussion or a talk about something, I always thought I was doing a little bit of both. I was acting and I was being authentic. I'm acting. In other words, because very few people believe this about me, but for many, many years, I suffered from stage fright. I couldn't get on stage to save my life. And finally, one day in Vegas, I did get on stage to do something, and I went, whoa, I'm not completely over it, but I know now how to overcome it. And I think that's probably what holds a lot of people back, why they need someone like you from Vocal Impact Productions to come in and help you overcome some of your fears of how to do this, how to not to do that, and not making, and even if you get up on stage and make a fool out of yourself, it's only going to last for 30 seconds, and then people might admire you more for being able to laugh at yourself than if you're not willing to take a chance and step out.
Well, the ability to at least recognize where you've goofed someplace and then to recover, to make that moment work for you and make you more human, more relatable. But then, of course, you don't just leave it at that. You need to redirect and regain that composure and move forward as the expert. That's critical. I mean, I've flubbed big time in front of clients on certain points, but it's about that recovery and just redirecting, not pretending it didn't happen, but saying, okay, how do we work with this? So and I've definitely had times where I've made a flub in the middle, recognized it. I had a slide once where I was doing a program for a tech company, and didn't realize that one of my standard slides for this particular presentation had a picture of a product from one of that client's competitors. And when it popped up, there were boos coming out of the crowd. I was like, what? Oh, shoot. Okay, so let's see what you do here. And I thought about it for a second, and of course I could turn tail and run, or I'd be glad that they paid me in advance, or I could turn around and make it a teachable moment. And I said that. So you know what? Let's take this and make it a teachable moment. So why do I have this image? Frankly, because when I looked at Google Images, I spent a lot of time trying to find a picture that was, A, representative of the principle, but B, had good enough resolution that when I expanded it to fit the screen, it still was a good visual quality. So why, when I spent all this time looking for this, did one of your products not come up at that quality? And then B, who is going to fix the problem for me by, as soon as this program is done today, who's going to take the responsibility of sending me a good GIF file that I can now replace this one with, so that from now on, no matter who I go to, yours is the image that I use up there.
Ooh,
and
nice
like
recovery.
6 hands went up in the audience. Out of about 75 people, about 6 hands went up. And I said, good. Are we good here? Yes? Okay, let's move on. And I just took it and we moved on from there. And at least 3 people came up to me at the end and said, I'm so glad that happened, because it really showed where you could put your money where your mouth is. Okay, yes, that was a mistake. It wasn't unrecoverable, but I was so glad to see how you handled it, because I would have just crumbled under the table in a million pieces if that had happened to me. So I think it actually increased my integrity with the group. It increased the admiration or the image that they had of me in their minds when we were done, because I made a mistake and was able to recover from it.
Well, Laura, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the Sunday Express. You'll be back at other times. She's been Dr. Laura Sicola. Well, I want to say that. She's a leadership communication expert, speaker, and author of Maximize Your Leadership Influence, and the founder of Vocal Impact Productions. Please get the book. Contact her on vocalimpactproductions.com. I think you'll find it fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this afternoon, Laura.
Thank you for having me, Gary. Always a pleasure.
All righty. Thank you very much. You're listening to The Biz. Gary Allen here with the Sunday Express. We're going to change course here a little bit. And joining me now is my good friend, Mr. Marshall Moore, who is a Wall Street broadcast journalist, business consumer editor, experienced investment banker, stockbroker, broadcast financial journalist, currently editing the Wall Street Diet and more for your money on Flipboard. Marshall, welcome to the Express.
Thank you. It sounds like we're out of time, but
yes, nice to see you. We'll talk to you on the other side.
Yes,
let's talk a little bit about it. The market was up a little bit this week, but it ended on a sour note. It ended almost 500 points down on the Dow. The Nasdaq was down 159, and the S&Ps were down about 50, almost 51 points. what contributed to the ups and downs of this week? And since this is going to be your final visit before the new year, what are you anticipating for 2019?
I anticipate that the market will open January 2nd at 9:30. That's the best I'm going to do on a next year prediction. You're going to.
I mean, there are a lot of people that are saying that we're going to hit a recession in 2019. Are you one of those believers? And how deep of a recession will it be if it does?
More so now than I have been in the last year. I started to concern myself with all of this just about a year ago when that amazing, wonderful, solve all your problems, and heal the sick, raise the dead tax cut bill came along. And there were some of those, if you remember, those of us that were saying it's going to be a sugar high. And it didn't take long, and we are now about 2.5% on the stock market below where we were when that bill passed.
Okay, so do you think it's going to be a deep recession? Do we expect it in the first quarter, the second, third, fourth quarter? When do you expect it?
Checking out the crystal ball right now. Stick with me here. Now, I'll go into it a little bit better because with the stock market, it is always a tale of two cities. And when I say that, it's New York City and Wall Street, of course, on Broad and Wall, not a very happy place. And the other place we're talking about is Washington, D.C. And those two, if you want to see the coincidence of those two cities and trickle down come into effect, it is when you have the conversion or the collusion, if you would, of those two, considering the kind of news that we're dealing with now. Everything, we started to say it last week, we've said it in many programs along the way through the years, and that is everything about investment, everything in life is about risk assessment. And if you can't do that, you don't belong in the market. Flash, the stock market is not for everyone.
True.
On the
Very
other
true.
side of things, even when you're in a bear market, you can make money in a bear market. You can be in the VIX, the volatility index, or short stock, or what have you. You can be on the sideline at a time where cash is king, and yes, that is an investment. When you get right down to it, everything is an investment. I don't care if you're buying, 25 cents for a slug of gum there, but what you're doing is you're risking 25 cents for the joy of, making like a cow and chewing on the cud there, or finding yourself with a big old dental bill. And for that pleasure, for that moment, that's what you're doing. You're investing 25 cents, risking that for the return of that pleasure of the moment.
How has Brexit, how is the England leaving Brexit, how is it going to affect us?
That's just one of the elements that are very heavily weighing on the market going into this new week. It's a complete mess. Theresa May has her hands full. She's been running around the European Union trying to get some kind of an agreement on the reworking of Brexit, a new Brexit deal, all these other variables that are coming through. The uncertainty is an easier situation for our listeners because having been a stockbroker, investment banker for many years, it always came down to the litmus test. What does this mean directly to your pocket? And in the macro, not very much for us. For the global economies, and when you blend a story like Brexit, and hopefully we don't have to go back to what Brexit means. We have a little bit more of a sophisticated audience here on 880 AM for South Florida, very sophisticated and savvy investor community going on right here. So taking into account Brexit, the effect it's had on the markets since it was voted on, and the volatility that came out of the recent aftermath, you take a look at the governance that's going on in some of the European countries that back at that time, I think we were more concerned about Greece and whether or not they would maintain viability. Now it's more Italy, it's France with the protests going on the streets. What is this, the third weekend in a row Paris is seeing these marches. So you have that. You have Germany with what is turning on to be a kind of a weakening of the leadership position, the economic strength of Germany throughout all the Brexit negotiations. Toss into that sanctions against Iran and the geopolitics that are coming in from the Middle East and Saudi Arabia in particular, OPEC with the announcement of a drawdown that is not taking a supportive role in the price of oil, at least going into the weekend. We were once again down sharp. If you've taken a look at what you're paying at the gas pump, even going into the holiday period, there's that is going to have let's put it this way, it's going to act as a sword of Damocles hanging over this marketplace as far as how heavily weighted energy is in the market overall. Let's go to the next big problem, the trade war. How critical that is here and now, and the fact is it is very easy to get into a trade war, and it is very complex getting out of one. And we talked about it last week when it involves everything from corporate espionage, Huawei, that story, and all of a sudden you're seeing the heads of companies very concerned about getting into any kind of a sphere where China would have the capability of being able to control your movement. Take into the account, if you want to get right down to the domestic situation, that cross between Wall Street and Main Street. We are staring not just at what's going to happen at Wall Street for the week ahead. We're going to be looking at the other wall that's going to put pressure on Wall Street, and that's the wall having to do with border negotiations and whether or not we're going to have a government shutdown by the end of the week.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a partial shutdown, I understand, though, if we do have one, right? Because the government is the government is funded until like 2019 in some areas. I mean, people who are listening, you don't need to worry about your Social Security checks getting there. They'll get there if you will get them in the latter part of the month, and there are other areas of the government will be open. So it's only going to be a partial shutdown if it does occur at all.
Mm-hmm. Hold that thought. Okay, and going into that, it's just the idea of what's ahead in the new Congress. The talk of recession is a healthy one normally, because if you're an investor, considerations of what if should always be forefront in your mind. It isn't the idea of just going like a bull into the china shop. It's a matter of being able to assess that risk environment. And what if we do hit a recession? There are certain groups that take advantage of just that kind of slowdown. And, a lot of people are going to be taking very close attention once again to the Federal Reserve and what is seemingly a guaranteed rate hike this month, and the prediction, because of the what is becoming more acceptable idea that we're going to hit a recession sooner rather than later, that we can, once again, going back to our discussion and trying to put it in perspective last week, you're talking about money. Money is not a act of God. You can do things. It's all in the management, whether it's a government or whether it's a company or whether it's science having to do with the weather. There are things that you can manage that can absolutely deal with whatever comes our way. In a time like this, yes, you do want to maintain more of a conservative viability, but interestingly enough, in this very kind of a market, and I can go back to the Great Recession, the big money that was made was in the riskier, more flamboyant, if you would, high-tech kind of stocks that got slammed early in the recession and came out of it with what became the FANG stocks, which were the leaders and high flyers into the current bull market. And until correction time this last week, and that's where we went into going into the weekend, but we've been here before where we've lost the entire gains of 2018, and we are now at a loss for the year. That's what
we're going to have to leave it at that. And Marshall, thank you so much. And I know you're going to join us on the other side when the new year arrives at some point or another. And thank you so much. He's Marshall Moore, a Wall Street broadcast journalist, business and consumer editor. He's an experienced investment broker, stockbroker. You can get a hold of him at Marshall Moore. More for your money on Flipboard. Marshall, thank you so much for joining us here on the Sunday Express on 880 The Biz.
And all of that. Happy holidays. Happy New Year, everyone. More to come.
Thank you so much. He was Marshall Moore. And I want to thank all of you out there for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here on the Sunday Express on 880 The Biz. We're on every Sunday at 5 p.m. Next Sunday, we'll have a show on the 23rd, but the first of the year, I'm not too sure. As I said, I'm moving, and I don't even know if I'm going to be up and running by then. So I'm excited about the new year. I'm excited about being here on 880 The Biz. And, of course, Regan, who is my producer, thank you so much, sir, for taking the time to produce this show for us. And everybody at 880 The Biz, thank you so much. Wanda, the program director, and everybody, I wish you all happy holidays. I'll be back next Sunday with a very special guest and a very special show. So join us next week right here at 5 p.m. on 880 The Biz for the Sunday Express. Until then, please, this is Gary Allen. Take care of yourselves and each other.
You've been listening to the Sunday Express with Gary Allen on AM 880 The Biz. Tune in next week for more great talk on the Sunday Express with Gary Allen, right here on AM 880 The Biz.